We often expect love and relationships to be easy and perfect, but the best of relationships are much like a bountiful garden that needs regular doses of tender, loving care. And like the weeds that can strangle and overtake even the healthiest garden, issues such as blame, resentment, and chronic conflict can ruin even the most promising relationship. Over time, I've come to see that imperfections are a natural part of every relationship, and that it's how we handle the imperfections and stumbles that make all the difference. Today, I'm joined by an Emmy Award-winning couple, Sean and Michele Kanan, who offer a guiding light through their new relationship books and deeply love-filled paradigm. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. I found out that my husband has been cheating on me. He wants me to forgive him. I can't, at least not now. His betrayal has cut me to the core. I don't trust him. I'm constantly angry and make him sleep in the spare bedroom. Can this be fixed, or should I just end the marriage and move on? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Marie Manley, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Marie Manley, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are imperfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Today, I'm joined by two very special guests, Sean and Michele Kanan, who will be sharing their expertise on film, acting, authorship, and being a passion-filled, loving couple. Welcome to the podcast, Sean and Michele. It's such a
pleasure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so wonderful to have both of you. And before we launch into this very juicy, sad topic, could you tell our listeners just a little bit individually about what makes you, you?
Take it away, babe.
Well, I'm usually the sidekick to Karate's bad boy.
Not true.
But so I was a PTA mom, and I was living in the suburbs with my 4 kids, and I had a similar circumstance to your writer, and I ended up finding myself very quickly in a new marriage with this one. And right at the beginning of our marriage, when we met,
I think we should clarify that you weren't the one cheating.
No, I think
that's important.
Yes, that is true.
That's an important piece.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give anyone the implication that.
Well, I didn't want to just throw it all out there, but yeah, sure. So I found myself in a relationship with this one, and I said, "Hey, so this is all going great, but do you remember I have 4 kids?" And he said, "Yes." So I thought, wow, either this is going to be an epic relationship and romance, or he's a serial killer and he'll kill us all. Either way, I'm covered.
Jury's still out.
Yeah, jury is still out, but it's been 15 years. Yeah. And, the kids are all grown and out now. And so, I guess that kind of makes us an expert on blended families and, this type of relationship scenario. So when we wrote our book, it was really kind of a to-do book or a how-to guide to have our relationship, because so many people ask us, how do we weather all the storms from Hollywood?
Beautiful background. I'm sorry about the Michele. I'm sorry about the betrayal. I didn't know that when I was matching the question with you two. So I am sorry about that, but it sounds like you really came out the other side in a really positive way. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Sean, your turn.
So I think most people know me as an actor, and I think for a long time, that's how I define myself. And now, while acting and producing and writing are all things that I'm passionate about and love, I truly define myself as being the other part of the partnership that I have with Michele. And as much as I love everything else that I do, if that were to all go belly up, I'd still be okay, because the central focus of my life is my relationship with Michele, and wherever that takes me, that's where home is.
True.
You gave me chills because I very much am the same way as you two are. Relationship, I often say, love is where we start from. Love is home. And many people put their relationship second, third, fourth, fifth, 100th on their list of priorities. And for me, relationship is number one. And I think in our culture, Sean, that many people, at least from what I've found, particularly males, would think that that's a weakness, that we should prioritize money, fame, fortune, and that the relationship falls where it does. And so I'm so thrilled that you said that, and grateful.
Well, you know, my career has only blossomed since coming together with Michele. And so, you know, I'm a very career-driven person. Make no mistake about it. And so is Michele. You know, we're very competitive, but we drive each other. But we both realize that the central core of what makes both of us successful in all of the other things that we do emanates from our relationship. And I saw something really interesting. There's this really cool Chinese monk who I think people might have seen before on TED Talks. I forget what his name is, but he said, you know, when in life, you have thousands of problems, but when you don't have your health, you only have one problem. And it's true. And for me, aside from my health, you know, if I had a problem in my relationship, that would very quickly become the biggest single greatest problem I have, and everything else would pale in comparison. And, you know, we even told the kids, we said, don't take this the wrong way, but our relationship comes first. And while that might sound selfish ostensibly, the reality is it's like, put your oxygen mask on first. The only way that we can be the best parents that we can be, and to protect them and help them and guide them and all of that other stuff, is if this works. Right. If this doesn't work, then nothing else is going to function properly. And once we came to understand that, and they understand that, things became simple, or simpler.
Well, clear, I think.
Clear. Clear. Clear.
Yeah, very clear. Yeah.
I agree with you too so much. I remember early on when I was getting my master's, the training was that healthy parenting looked like the capital letter A. And it was the mom and the dad connected at the top. For those of you looking on video,
I love that.
And then you have the connection between you two.
Yeah.
And then the kids can be the rest of the alphabet, but
Right.
you need that healthy parenting, that healthy A. And otherwise, the kids can split you. The kids get the inconsistency that they don't need, but when mom and dad are connected and strong.
Yeah.
And that is with life.
You know, it creates a template for them. You know, my parents have been married, I don't know, 50 some years, whatever. And my basic template for a happy relationship has always been, you know, my parents' commitment to each other. So I was raised wanting that and seeing that as what the goal was. Right. I understand that not everybody was fortunate enough to have that, and they've had to figure that out other ways. But if you're blessed enough to have parents that have had a longitudinally happy relationship, at least aspirationally, it puts you on the right track to having a secure, happy, monogamous relationship.
You just said one of my favorite words, secure.
Yeah.
And it sounds very much, even before you said that, I was thinking, oh, he must have a very secure attachment style.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that. So our kids now are all in their 20s and they're all dating. And I love to sit and kind of talk with them about what's going on in their relationship and what the dating world is like out there. And so I was listening. The way they talk to me is different than the way they talk amongst each other. And so I was listening to the three girls sit and talk, think like out of earshot, and they were saying, oh yeah, this guy, I mean, I think it'll work out. Like, he has a very secure attachment style. And I was thinking, wow, like kids are discussing this now. We never discussed.
Yeah, but I'm not being really honest. I did a deep dive into attachment styles for our book, and Michele and I went back and forth. Michele thought it was too wonky and kind of in the weeds, and I was like,
that wasn't what it was. It was very textbook. And so I said, it's kind of dry, and our style is more conversational, so you need to lighten it up and not be a textbook,
which we did, but it is important. It really is important. And if you're meeting somebody and after a brief period, you ascertain from the origin story they give you and how they talk about their parents and things like that, that they've got attachment issues. It doesn't mean that the relationship can't work out, but it means that there are going to be some very specific potential pitfalls and challenges that you as a partner have to be very aware of.
Well, also, I think that there's a whole kind of schedule that has to happen. And so, like I've told my kids, my daughter went to UCLA and she had a dual major in psychology and neuroscience and a minor in Italian. And she graduated in 4 years at the top of her class. And I was so impressed with her because she was going to be a neurosurgeon. And then she took a gap year and worked at a bakery. And so I was like, okay, like, sure. And so she was frosting cakes and it was really great and fun for her. And she really enjoyed it. But she kept kind of complaining about things because she lived in an expensive neighborhood and, she did all these things. And I said, well, darling, if you want to be a baker and frost cakes, you need to go live with the other bakers. You can't live in the neurosurgeon neighborhood, because there's a discrepancy in finance. So there's nothing wrong with it, but you can't choose to live like a neurosurgeon, but make the money of a baker unless somehow you do that. So when you have a relationship and you have somebody that has an anxious attachment style, there is a set of things that go along with it and a schedule to progress. And, I think every relationship is a spectrum. So if you're going to move down the spectrum and move forward, there are certain things that have to happen in order to progress you down that path. But you can't take somebody who's on a path of anxious attachment and put them on a secure one and say, okay, just now you're this one. You have to go through the motions and the steps. So don't, like we call this, if you, in your origin story, that's a chapter in our book is about develop your origin story. And it kind of is really connect with who you are as a person. If you're an anxious attachment, understand that about yourself and present that. Don't present as, if you say you want to be a domesticated cat and have, kittens with your partner and live this cushy lifestyle in this happy home, but you're a tiger, your mate is going to expect you to use a litter box. So if you're a tiger going to Vegas on the weekend with your buddies and, that's your happy place, then don't present that you want to be domesticated, because it's just going to be unhappy. Just put out there exactly what you want.
Absolutely, Michele. And I'm so grateful that you paused on this and you're using some beautiful metaphors and analogies that when we look at going out into the world, it's so important to know, and this is what I'm hearing you say, know yourself. Take the time to know who you are, know your attachment style. And if you're not into attachment, I happen to be, my fourth book, The Joy of Imperfect Love, all about attachment style. And we're not all about it, but it has that same foundation as yours does. But it doesn't even matter the paradigm. What matters is that you're saying, know yourself. Be congruent with yourself. You want to be a neurosurgeon? Great. That's your lifestyle. That's it. You want to be a baker? Great.
Yeah.
Make your life congruent with that. You want to be a kitty cat in a relationship? Great. But if you're really inside a parrot or,
Right.
a little baby bulldog, then
Right.
you have to know that so you're being congruent and genuine.
Right.
And
I
that's
tell a lot of my acting students, they say, well, what should we do as a new actor? And I said, before you slip on the skin of another character, you need to know who you are. And so the biggest thing that you can bring to the table that nobody else has is your authenticity and developing your self-awareness. As my self-awareness has developed significantly over, I would say, the last decade, I've become an infinitely better actor. And that's acting. So imagine, you're trying to meet your partner or be more authentic in your existing relationships, whether they're romantic, business, friends, whatever. One of the biggest assets that you can cultivate is getting to know yourself.
Right.
And, I think authenticity is an extremely formidable and powerful force multiplier. Not to digress too much, but I do public speaking, and sometimes I address people that are salespeople, and I say, I bet you're wondering, what the hell do I have in common with the guy who's an actor? And I said, at the end of the day, I'm in sales. My first round of sales is to producers and casting directors, and then my second round of sales is to the audience watching me. And one of the biggest tools that you can have as a salesperson is authenticity, because assuming your product is pretty much as good as the next guy's, they're buying you.
Right.
And if they're buying you, authenticity is often the determining factor between whether someone, buys into you or not.
And then the plus one to that is that once you determine who you are, you have to avoid the trap and the pitfall of kind of being malleable to being somebody else because you think that's what they want. Yeah. And there's a bit of shame in there, like, well, maybe what I am is not good enough, so I better change myself to what they want to be lovable. And so we have another chapter in the book called Shame Does Not Exist in This Dojo, because shaming is blaming. And it puts somebody into a very defensive position. Mm-hmm. And so you already start a discussion in conflict and in a negative place. So people tend to not be as authentic when they're on the defensive,
right?
Because they kind of put up armor and walls and like anything that they need to do to deflect from that pain of shame. So the best part is to just acknowledge things without finding blame.
It's an incredibly
9 times out of 10 things don't really have a central focus of whose fault it is. It's just generally kind of the coordination. Like when I first met Sean, he had a really strong attachment to auditions where he would have an audition, he'd get very upset after the audition if he didn't get the part because he felt very judged. And I had to keep reminding him that an audition is not about judging you as a person. It's about judging your fit for the part. So maybe you just weren't right for it. Maybe they just had somebody else, they had a brunette in mind, or maybe they had, like a girl in mind and they were just trying a guy. Like, you just don't know. It's not about you as an actor. They called you in. So that's the judgment of you. They're assuming you're talented. They are assuming you're a good actor. They're assuming you're a good fit. Just in the moment, your goodness didn't fit with what they were looking for.
Absolutely. And that is a key piece. Clearly, when you two met, you found that you were a good fit and you've really worked it. Now, let me pause because you've said so many good things. Now, Sean, I want to go to you for just a minute. You're known for, I believe, Karate Kid 3. And tell us a little bit more about that work and how you use that work, that authentic in your body work, which is something that I find really fascinating, and that genuineness to forge this relationship with Michele, this relationship that is so strong and grounded, so that maybe then we can pivot from there to what might have gone amiss in our listener's question. But let's spotlight you just for a second, Sean, because I'm really getting Michelle's energy.
Could you drill down? Can you drill down in that question a little more? Because that was, I'm trying to make the leap from Karate Kid 3 to my relationship, and I'm having trouble crossing the chasm. So, could you just rephrase the question a little bit?
Absolutely, I do have a way of doing that. So you're presenting, listeners, if you're not seeing it on video, Sean is very strong, very centered. He's telling us how grounded he is. As a character, TV and film, you're also very strong character. As we're talking about genuineness and authenticity, which I'm a huge believer in, the Carla you see now is the Carla you're going to see outside or wherever I am with my clients. I'm sensing that is very much who both of you are. What you see is what you get.
What you get. Yeah. Yeah, no, we're very much like that. I think, like I said, I think authenticity is one of the most powerful, sexy qualities you can have. Now, your authenticity might not be everybody's cup of tea. And that's a lesson that people need to learn. It's like the Don Miguel Ruiz book, The Four Agreements. Take nothing personally. And that's Michele gave you a little insight into how I used to look at auditions and things. And it took me a long time to get there. But now that I have gotten there, not only is my acting work better because I don't attach to things the way that I did. And if you want to get really, deep into it, all of the stuff by the Buddha talks about how attachment is the source of all suffering. I know I'm digressing a little bit there, but as far as playing characters that are strong and things like that, I think in the beginning of my career, I had a very different idea of what strength was. Okay. Strength was force of personality. It was charisma. It was externalizing. And as I've become, hopefully, a more evolved, self-aware man and actor, you learn it's kind of like the old adage. I think George Clooney said this. He said, a movie star knows, doesn't show. In other words, you're up on a 30-foot screen, and if you're being overly emotionally demonstrative and big, you're giving away too much. If it's coming from an internal place of strength and knowledge of your strength, where you don't have to be overtly demonstrative with it, that's true strength. And I hope that as I've gotten older and life has knocked me around a little bit, which is probably the best way to gain some wisdom. I've been able, people ask me all the time, what would you say to your younger self? And I would say, you are enough. As a younger guy, I always felt the need, whether it was with women or whether it was walking into a room for an audition or anything, to show people who I was. Well, when you do that, you're already giving it away in a way that shows that you don't really have it.
You answered the question perfectly. Perfectly. You looped it straight back to this inner sense of core, I am a good, evolving human being. And when we bring that to relationships, whether we're dating, whatever's happening in our lives, or we're already married or in a long-term partnership, when we bring that core stability, I don't have anything to prove, I'm learning, I'm evolving, here I am.
Yeah.
It's so vulnerable and rich and beautiful and strong, not perfect.
No, but everyone's life is messy. We say that in the book. People maybe they're watching this right now going, wow, look at this couple, they look great, and they're on TV and blah blah blah, and everything must be perfect. We have our bullshit too, like everybody does. Everyone's life is messy, okay? And what that really takes me to is I forget who said it. I know Robin Williams did. You never know what private wars somebody is fighting, okay? And luckily, Michele and I don't too many private wars, but we have, and that's why I think empathy is one of the absolute most important qualities that we can cultivate as human beings and that we can transmit and teach to our children.
Right.
And I think that empathy and justice are the two last best hopes for our civilization.
Yeah, true. I heard something really profound
Did I say it?
Probably, but it was in my late teens, early 20s, and it was the notion that people have a hard time looking past their own nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at the time, in your development, you're very egocentric because that's what teens are all about. And so, 25, you kind of start coming out of it. And so at the time, it really, was like a light bulb for me. And so it was an exercise to think outside of myself. So something would happen, instead of reacting in the moment, I would think, why did they do that? Like, what's coming from them? What did they possibly have to gain from this? Or what did they possibly have to lose from this? Or why was it presented in this way? Or why now? Or why was a really big question for me. And when I was able to do that, I started to see alternative perspectives. So instead of having an argument about things that are like, well, I think this, my truth is this, I believe this, and I'm asserting this, I am able to have a conversation where I say, I would like to know what your perspective is. In earnest, I really would like to hear it. And I find that it can almost be combative at times.
You know what's combative? Because there's a flip side to it, which is perception. People operate from two places. What is their perspective based on their worldview? And what is their perception of what they're seeing that may not be accurate? And if you realize that someone's perception is off because they're not seeing the reality of something, then you can understand that. But if you understand that their perspective is off because they come from a completely different world than you do, of course they might look at something 180 degrees differently.
Right.
Absolutely. And for those who are watching, I'm going to do a little experiment. I have a heart. What does the heart say?
Are there letters?
But from my side, it says peace. And so when I flip it around, and that's the way when I work with couples, I talk about perspective. Mm-hmm. At first, you weren't seeing what I was seeing. You were coming.
Right. I was looking at the dark part, thinking of.
Yeah. And then I turn it around and
screen's bad.
It's such an important piece when we look. So you're bringing up so many key pieces: empathy, the importance of being able to be in someone else's shoes, to feel with them. Also, you said it, Michele, or you were alluding to it. I'll give it the word curiosity. Yeah. Being curious about somebody else's perspective. Yeah. There's so much healing in that instead of the right, wrong. So you two talk about your relationship rule book as part of your work. And I'd like to see if we can use that. So your books, could you talk a little bit about how you would use your books in answering this woman's very unfortunate question? She's been betrayed. Should she, we don't tell listeners, we're not going to tell anybody what to do or how to do it. This is a very personal choice.
I might. But I got a few thoughts on that.
I like this. Okay. Let
me jump in. Just tell me what COBRA stands for, and then you take it. Because I think you have to understand. She asked about our books.
No, she's asked about the relationship rule book. What is it? So just to and then you can tell yours. So the relationship rule book, it starts in the beginning of the relationship, and it's either a physical manifestation or you can just kind of bat it around. And it's done during the activities of courting, like when you go on a date. The date isn't for you to see the latest movie or to, see how you are at putt-putt golf. It is to have a backdrop to get to know somebody and to learn their origin story and kind of meld your expectations together and to make a list of things that are acceptable and are off limits and kind of define the relationship. So for example, in your caller circumstance, infidelity. It's a big one, and it's usually comes up in the beginning. And a lot of people just assume that, we don't really have to talk about it because that's just not an option for us. But then you don't really understand where people are on their spectrum of fidelity and why something like this happens. So in your caller circumstance, should she just forgive him? Well, Like, what was their agreement, and what, it's a very personal, it's a very personal decision, and it starts with doing a personal inventory. And obviously she's angry now, but going outside of herself to understand why he did it is going to be very key to whether or not she's able to forgive him. If this was something that was like, there were problems in the relationship, and he's, is holding some resentment against her, and he did this to punish her, then that's one scenario where, like this is, retaliation. So how do you feel about retaliation, and what that do for you? If it's something where, it was just out of left field and it was some random impulse, well, now you have somebody that's impulsive and does something super destructive impulsively. Do you want to live the rest of your relationship that way? Like, it's all of these things are what you're willing to live for, the live with. But the one thing that I would say in her situation is, she has to decide first whether or not she's willing to forgive him. And if her answer is no, she needs to end the relationship, because you cannot be in a relationship where you constantly torture somebody, or you constantly blame somebody, or you're in a situation where it's never going to be forgiven. And if she decides that she might be able to, then stick it out until she decides, I can forgive her or I cannot. But that is the only thing that I would say is the important thing in terms of forgiving or not.
So, Michele, thank you for that. And I want to highlight your idea of a relationship rule book. And for listeners who it might sound like, why do I need rules in my relationship? I am a big believer in we're talking two different, our verbiage is different, but it's the same idea. I call them relationship agreements. And we have agreements in relationships explicitly or implicitly. And the implicit ones are the ones that just come in by the wayside and we don't really pay attention to them. They're just what happens. And what you're recommending is what I recommend. Be explicit as early on in the relationship as possible about your priorities, your standards. Is texting somebody with emojis who happens to be someone you kind of like, is that okay in the relationship? Or if you're in a committed relationship, is that no way okay? What's your level of transparency? We're not saying there's a right or wrong, but we are saying there's a way that's going to feel right to both people. Make it concrete, make it palpable, make it real. Okay, thank you. I also really appreciate the piece about forgiveness, because forgiveness, like resentment, is really in the long run toxic for everyone. And if we aren't able to forgiving listeners doesn't mean we're giving someone the permission to keep hurting us. It means that amends have been made and there's an agreement to move forward, whatever that looks like, so that neither has that yoke of either resentment or not forgiving. Okay. So we have that foundation. Sean, what would you like to add?
I think Michele and I concur on this. Look, it ultimately comes down to what a person can tolerate within themselves. And if you know, as the person who was betrayed, that you aren't going to be able to live with this, and like Michele said, you're extending the relationship as a way of punishing your partner, then you need to get out. You need to get out. You also, I think, have to understand, and this is predicated on the partner that betrayed truly wanting to make amends and change, that the relationship is fundamentally changed and will never be the same. There can be a new relationship. It could put, I would hesitate to say it's going to be a better one, but there will need to be a new relationship with a new understanding. But once trust is broken, it's broken. Can it be repaired? I think it can be made better. But one of the things I love about my relationship with Michele is, we're like everybody else. Do we bicker sometimes? Do we fight? Sure, whatever. But when push comes to shove, I trust her implicitly and she trusts me implicitly. And there is something so unbelievably reassuring about that. You know what I mean? It's almost like, this is going to be stupid, but it's almost like when you need a couch and you get that couch and you're like, great, got that done. I don't ever have to worry about getting a couch again. I love this couch. And you know what I mean? It's like, I don't have to worry about that. Do we have other stuff we deal with? Sure. But if I had to, in the back of my head, or not even so much in the back of my head, also contend with the fact that I don't trust her 100%, well, that would take up a lot of space rent-free in my brain. And it would affect, I believe in things that are very holistic, you know? And I think if one thing isn't working, you can compartmentalize, but very few people are able to compartmentalize so effectively that there isn't bleed over into other areas of your life.
You said it so brilliantly, individually and as a team. And I really want to highlight, Sean, what you're saying about trust. Because if you have the type of trust that you're talking about, where you feel that your partner, it's just a given, there are no questions about the fidelity, the trust in the relationship. It goes back to the beginning of the podcast where we were talking about home is where we start from, love is where we start from. And if we leave home knowing we trust home, come back home knowing we trust home, the person in it, our key partner, everything else in life feels so much better, because even if we have a bad day or a terrible day, we come back and we know we have that trust. And I always think about it coming from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where when you look at that,
exactly.
And the bottom is security. And when we have safety and security in a relationship, that builds, everything else can go up from there. And you're right, we can have troubles, we can bicker a little bit here and there, but we know in the end that this is unbreakable, unshakable, and that's brilliant. The other piece, Sean, when you're talking about forgiving the partner, I also agree hugely on the amends. It's different if you have a partner who betrays you and comes back and says, oh, it just happened and, you're going to have to get over it.
Well, that's someone who's a narcissist. I mean, that's somebody who you can't deal with a narcissist.
No, you can't. An entirely different thing if you have somebody coming and taking responsibility and saying, I am so sorry. This is what happened. This is why I did. I'm not excusing it. I'm explaining it. I'm taking these steps. I'm going to therapy. I'm doing these different things. Let's do some couples counseling. Let's move through this and create safety and security, because you're both right.
But then it comes back to the other partner knowing who they are. Mm-hmm. Like, I know myself, and I know that as evolved as I like to think that I am, there is a part of me that I couldn't forgive that. But that's me. I know that about me. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I would rather leave I don't even talk about our relationship, because I hypothetically, I would rather leave a relationship than continue to, grind in silence and probably punish the other person, because I just don't think I could forgive it. Some people could. And
I mean, I think that there's, like, seeing how relationships are evolving. I think that there's now, with all the trauma that's in the world after COVID and after, the world kind of feeling like it's on fire, when you find comfort and safety and security in being with somebody, it's not as easy to put a black mark and saying, okay, I'm going to throw all of that away just because of this one thing. And I think especially women can be a lot more empathetic and willing to kind of ride the negative and overlook certain flaws to have that sense of safety and security, because I think there's a part of people that feel unlovable. And once you have this failed relationship, I think that that's the hesitation of hanging on. And like you start to get into this negative pattern of, like, I'm going to pile all this stuff on top of me because, yeah, they did that. probably deep down it was my
You know what
fault.
though?
So
I think if I were ever to be unfaithful, it would crush me
mhm,
because I couldn't be the guy that I am with Michele now,
right,
knowing that I betrayed not only her, but my character.
right,
Do you know what I mean? I can,
right. I
100%.
I
agree.
can be the guy that I am because I know I walk it like I talk it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree,
So,
but it sounds like your question is someone who is, right from the jump, didn't kick him out, didn't say, okay, you violated our relationship, you've crossed a boundary that I've set, and I need you to leave. Instead, it's this like half measure where they're in another room, but I still have access. So they ask for forgiveness, and I'm kind of thinking about it, instead of,
well, I think also though, probably for a lot of people, it's a confusing period of time.
sure.
You don't necessarily have a monolithic answer
Well, it's a
to,
grief process.
but I'm actually a little more empathetic to that purgatory
Yeah.
of not being monolithically clear
Right.
immediately.
Yeah.
But I think you need to make a decision and get clear
Mhm.
quickly.
Right.
And then move towards one or the other and commit. It's the vacillating that causes the pain. Once you pull the Band-Aid off and decide either I'm getting divorced and starting a new life, which is painful, I've done that, or you say we're going to go down the road to recovery and healing ourselves and building this new relationship, at least you know where you're going. But humans hate the unknown.
Yeah.
The unknown causes anxiety.
Yeah.
And once you know what you're doing, you can live in the present and you can work forward.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And I also love, first, Sean, that you were talking about this purgatory, because I work with couples where there's been betrayal and it is a purgatory. And Michele, I love that you brought up the very real truth that in a relationship, I sometimes call them convenience ships, where
Yeah.
there isn't a connection of true love any longer. Maybe there never was, but two people have come together and it's convenient and their financial needs are met, and to detangle things feels so scary.
Right.
Going back to your image earlier about living like a neurosurgeon but having a salary of a baker. It is like, for many people, it is the truth that they're moving from a lifestyle of a neurosurgeon to a lifestyle of a bakery clerk or a cashier in a store.
Right.
And for some people, they would rather stay and live in the neurosurgeon type of life than split and go down. And I'm not judging that, but going back to what you're both saying, you need to look inside yourself. Be honest with yourself. If you want to stay in something that's convenient and that's part of it, that's your right, but do the work so that you're not carrying around this noose of resentment. Because resentment is so toxic, and blame and all of that is so toxic to the self and the entire relationship.
Yeah.
Both had so many wonderful things to say and so many beautiful concepts that sound as if they're not just going to be helpful for established couples, but for couples who are new to dating or out in the dating world. So are there a few, as we wind down, are there a few other key concepts you'd like to highlight for our listeners?
I think the other thing is that aside from the comfort and the convenience and, things becoming an arrangement, I think that's a bigger purgatory, because when you do that, you assign yourself the label unlovable. And so instead of having an enriched relationship where you're fulfilled emotionally and you're loved and cared for and respected, and you have, this, like I can only say in our relationship, we've had ups and downs and we've had things, but Sean has always been the emotional piece to me that I think I was missing in my first relationship. When you're young, it's like you seem like you're in love, and then, we got married, we had kids, and things just kind of went on this race. So we kind of, like people go on, we call it cruise control, and you lose the passion and But, as things move along, you can always tap back into that. And in my first relationship, I couldn't. I didn't have that. So it was kind of, again, maybe a convenience. But in this relationship, no matter what, I can always tap back into that passion because we're so emotionally connected. And to have that people think that it's easier to be in a convenient relationship or a convenient space. You lose a part of yourself. So I would just say and caution people, when you are in an impasse in a relationship, you need to do this experiment. You need to go away for 2 days, like get a hotel, like leave your space and everything, just go somewhere else, stay there for 2 days with no contact, no checking in, no nothing, just sit by yourself. And if you are wondering and most of your time is spent wondering what's going on at home, you're going to start to yearn and miss it, and that will reignite that. If you don't, if you're like, wow, this was a huge break and I feel so comfortable and I'm just getting so much done and I just should have done this years ago, it's not there. And it never was. So it helps you to, you have to get out of your familiar surroundings to find out really where you are, because you take on a lot of your situation and your environment. And I think that'll be really helpful to kind of be able to think. Like for me, I was in a 20-year relationship and the next day I was in this one. And so I was terrified. I thought it was never, I was never going to be able to do anything again or be with someone. And now I have such a fulfilling relationship that like all the little things that we fight about seem so silly.
I have a question, Michele, just to clarify for our listeners. It wasn't really just the next day, was it?
It was the next day. It was literally later that afternoon. I left and I went to see, it's all in the book, by the way. I went to see my friend and I was like, I can't believe it. I finally did it. And she's like, well, I'm busy right now. And the rest is in the book.
Read the book.
Okay, read the book. Read the book. What a love. And that's proof, isn't it? That when you have the courage, when you look at your life and you're honest and you say, is my life better with this person or without this person? Am I being true to myself if I stay? Or we have to go back to the self. And then once we make that decision and are all in, whether it's staying or going, the universe has a way of supporting us. If we're
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Sean, final words from you.
When you have a book, you want to promote it because you want people to buy it, and we're no different. But I really believe with every cell in my being that the information, not only in our book, Cobra Couples, but in the first two books, Way of the Cobra and Welcome to the Kumite, have the ability to change people's lives because the information is brilliant. And I can say that without sounding arrogant because it's not our information. It's all of our information. It's the universe's information. We're just the messengers bringing it to you. And it's probably things that on some level you've heard before, but I always equate it to being like a 15 or 16-year-old boy who's at that contentious age with his father. And no matter how good the advice is, he can't hear it. And then It's like the Mark Twain quote, when I was 18 years old, I couldn't believe, what an idiot my father was. And by the time I was 21, I couldn't believe how much he'd learned. It's that sort of thing. And so I say the information in the books is brilliant because it is. And you either know it intuitively or maybe you've forgotten it, but we're going to help you tap back into it. And if you apply it and put it into action, your life will change. And if it doesn't, you call me and I'll give your money back. How's that?
Sounds amazing. All right. Now, where can our listeners find you and your books?
You get the on Amazon.com. It's Way of Cobra, Welcome Kumite, and Cobra Couples. Way of the Cobra is on Audible. And I'd also like to give a gratuitous plug to my TEDx speech, which was just selected as the editor's choice by TED.com. I talk a lot about stuff that Michele and I talk about from the other books, and it's about the art of unbecoming, that maybe life is less about becoming someone and more about unbecoming who we've been told to become.
Beautiful. And that TEDx, it's out, correct?
It is out. It's been out for a little over a month. Yeah.
Okay.
So please check it out.
Do not worry about having a pen in hand. I will make sure that links to this beautiful couple's books, to Sean's TEDx talk, website, all of that, they will be in the show notes. So please don't worry, especially if you're driving, you'll be able to find them. And my goodness, thank you so much for bringing your joy, your authenticity, and your work to all of us, and for your time today. It's been such a pleasure.
This was such a pleasure sitting down with you. And thank you so much to all your viewers and listeners. We really appreciate it. And go out and live life and be happy.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And be authentic. And to
Yes.
our listeners, my thanks to you for tuning in, for sharing your time and energy with us. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanley.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manley wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And, as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.